I always think that this piece of the Yorkshire coast south of Whitby is wild and beautiful, and it certainly inspired two writers who, by their books and the films made from them, made it world famous. The two writers were Bram Stoker and Leo Walmsley. Leo Walmsley lived over there in Robin Hood's Bay and wrote a marvellous series of novels about the life of the fishing community. They're full of insights into fishing, into marine biology, and into the struggles of life in the 20s and 30s of this century. The other writer, of course, Bram Stoker, came as a visitor. A wild Irishman connected with the theatrical profession at the time, he found inspiration here for his greatest novel, Dracula, the classic horror story. This particular spot is actually very interesting. It is, of course, Ravenscar, and we're in the grounds of the Ravenhall Hotel, which hang on this precipitous cliff, the peak of Ravenscar. The first settlers here were Romans who ran a signal station. They were followed by the Vikings. And then, of course, the area disappears from history until the hotel, in whose grounds we are, was built. In its heyday, it had gardens which swept down the cliff here right down to the shore. Imagine mowing the lawns on that lot. This hotel certainly had its moments. It was built in the 18th century. Its most famous guest probably was George III. He stayed here and he was treated for the disease porphyrio, which demanded that he be flogged by his physician. Now it's a family hotel specialising in Dracula suppers. But it's time to leave Ravenscar and go away to Robin Hood's Bay, to Leo Walmsley country, a mile away as the cormorant flies. There can't be many seaside villages prettier than this, and one of the best views comes as you wind your way down streets that twist and turn to the harbour. A busy community, and one that Leo Walmsley loved. Leo Walmsley, in his book So Many Loves, talks about the village, particularly from the point of view of his father's occupation, which was an artist. And of course, the son followed the sea very hard from his boyhood. He fished full-time at times. He worked on marine biology down in the laboratory in the village. And of course, he wrote. He wrote on just about every subject, but his first love really was geology. Geology really intrigued him, and he did, in fact, write a guide to the fossils of this district. And from then on, of course, he wrote what I would call faction, a mixture of fact and fiction, in which all the facts were good, and the framework was a fictional story. He disguised names of people and places, and he was rather coy about this in some ways. In one of his books, Phantom Lobster, he describes Bramblewick without saying it's Robin Hood's Bay, and then proceeds to give the latitude and longitude with great precision. Well, this is the right street, King Street. Lovely, all piled up, one house on top of the other, positively medieval. And of course, at the back, superb views of the bay. And this is the place we're looking for. This is the house where Leo Walmsley spent his early years. Leo Walmsley was born in Shipley near Bradford in 1892, but his family moved here when he was only 2 years old, and this, of course, was the place in which he had the inspiration for most of his popular books. He was a versatile man, and of course he had a distinguished war career in the First World War in the Flying Corps. He managed to survive 14 plane crashes. And then, of course, he came back to the bay, he left, he came back again, and for the rest of his life, he had an increasingly long-distance attachment to the bay. But the books that are written around this place, the novels like Three Fevers, Sally Lunn, Master Mariner, the semi-autobiographical works like So Many Loves, like Foreigners, which, of course, was his own status when he came here. He was definitely an incomer. And, of course, later he wrote The Sound of the Sea about his boyhood in the bay in the 90s and the early years of this century. As I say, a versatile man who packed a lot of action into his 73 years. But I think the most enduring monument to him will be his Robin Hood's Bay books, his Bramblewick books, as he called them, and, of course, the film Turn of the Tide that came from Three Fevers, which most people, I think, would regard as his masterpiece.
Mother, it's come.
What's come is a newfangled piece of technology that's going to upset the traditional ideas of the village community and set family against family.
What have they got?
I don't know. I know that as well as you do.
Aha! You think you know the bar, but you don't. It's stronger a lot, and it'll drown you if you don't watch out.
I heard it. It's for Father. If it's good enough for the lifeboat to go out, it's good enough for your father to get in.
We launch up?
Wait. Let her go, John!
Did you see if it wasn't for the bar?
They're making for the bar. That's enough.
Safe at last, back to an admiring audience of friends, fishermen and family, and the comforts of a Bramblewick cottage. But it's when you come round the back that you really appreciate the view from these cottages. That's the Walmsley's house in the corner, by the way. They look down to Ravenscar to the south, Out over the rock scars where the young Leo learned about marine life and pursued his early interests. And of course away to the north here to these superb cliffs. That's dinosaur country. That's where he learned about fossils, which were his first interest. This is a place that would inspire anybody. Jesus. My word, this tide really has turned now, there's no doubt about it. Still, I must carry on looking for my fossil. Oh, here's another one. That means I've now got 4 devil's toenails and 1 little flat seashell. The devil's toenails, of course, known locally also as miller's thumbs, are a kind of fossil oyster that lived here in the days of the dinosaurs. 180 million years ago, give or take 10 or 20 million, these were living in a nice, shallow tropical sea. And believe me, this is not a tropical sea today. Walmsley loved this beach, and I'm doing just what he used to do. I'm poking about to see what's living on the rocks, to see what's been washed up. All kinds of things come to shore here. This little rock is almost a living zoo. It's got periwinkles living in the crevices. There's the limey tubes of the worm, Pomatoceros trichita, past ones living on the rocks. And there's 1 or 2 other interesting things. Whoops. Here's some dead men's fingers washed up from deep water. These are rather spongy, soft corals that live out on the rocks under the overhangs and crevices. Odd things, really, but these, of course, are dead now. And there are other things. The rock has on it a mixture of shellfish. There's more periwinkles, young mussels, and there's a dog whelk who's living on the others. This little thing, would you believe, eats mussels and barnacles and the shellfish of the rocks. It's the equivalent, really, of a tiger in the middle of a herd of zebras when you think about it. But, of course, all on a half-inch scale. As I say, this is the sort of thing that Walmsley loved and which he classified for himself, making discoveries as a boy and as a youth. And over there's the Leeds University Marine Lab where he worked for a while. And, of course, put his training into practice. Well, here I am on the balcony of the Bay Hotel. Lovely day, lovely view. And what could be better for a day at the seaside than a fresh crab sandwich? Such is the stuff that dreams are made of. Dreams of a ruined abbey, dreams of a wild headland, and dreams of a red-roofed town piled up against a cliff. These are the things that inspired Bram Stoker to place the coming ashore of Dracula as a giant hound here in Whitby. Stoker himself once said that the whole book was inspired by an overdose of dressed crab and the dreams that resulted from that. There was a real Dracula. He was the Count or Voivode of Wallachia between 1455 and 1462, and he had a pretty sinister reputation. In fact, his local nickname was the Impaler. According to history of that area, the whole clan of Draculas were a pretty unpleasant lot. And of course, the country that Bram Stoker selected, away down in the shank end of Europe, Transylvania and the adjoining provinces in the Carpathian Mountains, was a hotbed of superstition. This was homeland to the vampire legends and also, of course, to the werewolf. Well, before we go across to the scene of Dracula's dark deeds, let's have a look at two other reminders of Whitby's past. The first one is this arch made out of the jawbones of a whale. This one was presented by Norwegians in 1963, and it commemorates the Greenland whale fishery, in which Whitby ships and Whitby skippers were preeminent between about 1750 and 1830. The Greenland trade was for whale oil, for street lighting and other uses, and for whalebone. The baleen in the mouth of the whale was used almost like we use plastic today for a variety of uses, including women's stay busks for corsetry. The trade came to a sticky end, of course, when gas street lighting was invented. Let's go and have a look too at another reminder of one of Whitby's great men, a famous one indeed. Here we are at the statue of Captain James Cook, navigator, explorer, great seaman, and of course one-time native of these parts. This statue was erected to commemorate the bicentenary of his great voyage in 1970. The monument also commemorates the Whitby ships, Endeavour, Resolution, Adventure and Discovery, Whitby ships which Cook used on his epic voyages, and also, of course, they commemorate the men who sailed on them. And there he stands, the great man himself, one eye looking out to sea and the other fixed firmly on the Abbey. To recap on the Dracula story, the Count took ship on the Russian schooner Demeter, left his estates in Transylvania, en route for his new estate in London, and he decided to come ashore at Whitby, and this he did most dramatically. The ship was wrecked in a storm, but by then Dracula had disposed of the crew, and when it hit the beach, the captain was lashed to the mast. There were 50 boxes of Transylvanian mould in the hold, and of course the Count escaped in the guise of a giant black hound and came here to the churchyard of St. Mary's, where he began his Dracula business, his vampiring, from the grave of a suicide. The churchyard of St. Mary's, crowded with monuments to Whitby's dead, many of them, of course, mariners. This is a place that Bram Stoker came to quite often, and in fact, he liked the spot so much that he said that this was quite the nicest spot in Whitby. And he stood here and he looked over this view across the harbour mouth, up to the headland of Sands End. Marvellously picturesque today, but of course to him this was the stimulus for setting the ultimate horror of Dracula. Well, after the windy cliff top, the parish church of St Mary's a very peaceful place. And what a church it is. It's really a gem amongst parish churches. Not particularly old. The earliest parts date back to about 1550, built, of course, by the people of Whitby after the abbey had gone out of use following the dissolution of the monasteries. And, of course, it's been changed quite a lot since those early beginnings. But if you look around you, you see something really remarkable in local craftsmanship. All the galleries, the mouldings, the pillars, built in wood, an amalgamation of different heights, different levels, put together really by men who were probably the shipwrights who built the Whitby ships of those periods. And, of course, a lovely survival, the box pews, which fortunately were not swept away in the Victorian improvements. And on this one, you can just see the inscription "For strangers only," telling you clearly who was to use the pew. Whitby Abbey, founded in 657 by King Oswy of Northumbria. One of 12 abbeys that he built in relief almost at having beaten his old enemy, Penda, the wicked king of Mercia. And of course, the first abbess was St Hilda. She came down from Hartlepool to take over this foundation. She was the lady, of course, credited locally with turning the snakes into stones. Crafty Whitby people used to carve heads on the fossil ammonites and sell them to visitors as petrified snakes. A superb abbey which, of course, through the Middle Ages flourished and then, of course, met its comeuppance at the time of the dissolution. Wouldn't it be nice to throw some light on the Dark Age mysteries of this place? Where's King Edwin buried, the kinsman of Oswy, defeated, in fact, by the same Penda the heathen that Oswy slew? He's buried here somewhere, according to Bede, along with other kings. And what about Cadman, the farm labourer, discovered by the Abbess Hilda, writing a pure kind of poetry? He became the father of English poetry. Where's he buried? And then, of course, imagine all this roofed over as it was before the dissolution, when they stripped the lead off the roof and allowed it to fall down in its own time. The fact that so much remains is probably only due to the point that you can see the abbey from the sea, and it was a useful sea mark for mariners. But it's nice that this bit survived, though it's tempting to think how it was in its full glory. So it's from these chilly waters that's emerged the inspiration for these two very different writers. Leo Walmsley and his homely fishing folk, and Bram Stoker and the horrors of Transylvania. Well, all those events were in the imagination. All you're likely to get now from the North Sea are fishers, the occasional lobster and so on. But who knows what mysteries might yet emerge from beneath the waves.